Hello, my name is Jared. This is my seminar media assignment. The TED Talk that I decided to do uh, was, um, the topic was how early childhood adversity leads to complications in a child's future. The speaker was Nadine Burke. She is the California's Surgeon General, and the reason that I chose to speak about this topic is because I thought that as a class that likes to talk about, well, sometimes focuses on mitigating risks towards child development, that this would make it more apparent to me some more specific examples as it was talking about, how to first assess it and then deal with it. But we'll get into that now. So what Nadine talks about is things called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs for the acronym. It includes physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance abuse, incarceration, separation, or domestic violence. And they were surprisingly incredibly common in the study that she surveyed to see if anyone had an ACE. She's found that at least 67% had at least one ACE, and 12% had at least four. And they found a correlation towards ACEs and worsening health outcome for things like pulmonary issues, hepatitis. People were with four ACEs were 2.5 times more likely than average to have hepatitis, four times as likely for depression, 12 for suicidality, and people with seven or more were triple the times as likely to get lung cancer, and 3.5 for heart diseases. And she noted that it was the number one killer in America, and that this is because early childhood adversity impairs the development of the pleasure and rewards part of the brain, the nucleus accumbens, which is linked to substance abuse, and inhibits as well the prefront that these ACEs inhibit the development of the prefrontal cortex, which manages things like impulse control and processing, as well as it has a big impact on the amygdala, which provides the fear reaction. And all this can, point to why they were more likely to engage in behavior that brings adverse effects after suffering from these ACEs. However, even the people who didn't engage in such behaviors as well suffered from cancer three times the rate of the normal population. And as the part of the brain that deals with stress is as well impaired, this results in a constant release of cortisol and things like it. So they're stressed all the time. The video described this like how you see a bear in the woods, how you're stressed, and rightfully so, because it's triggering your fight or flight reaction, but describes people with this impairment to act or to feel as though the bear is with them whenever, like at all times, in unreasonable instances. She created a clinic to screen people and to help heal them from the impacts of the ACEs by reducing the amount of them that the child faces in their life through, treatments, through things such as home visits, healthcare coordination, mental health, nutrition, and holistic intervention and medication, as well as, informing parents into how to implement these things into the child's situation, like how to, how you teach uh, parents, hey, cover the light sockets so that they don't stick their finger in them, teaching them like how to properly provide nutrition, mental health care, all that stuff. And so she considers these not to be just best practices, but rather a movement and a public health crisis, like how a generation fought with AIDS, how a generation fought with tobacco, and that the reason that people are struggling with this is because they're scared to help themselves because they think that the problem applies too much towards themselves. And so that she says with her final message that firstly, what we need to do is find the courage to understand that it affects us all. Again, calling back to that 67% of people who were being affected by the ACEs. And so, how I thought this related to our class, it talks a lot about the long-term issues of cortisol and how it can lead to adverse effects, as well as the model of the video is formed not just as an informative lens, but as well as a proactive one, like what this course seeks to instill into its future teachers and such. Um, it talks about the mitigation process, how you should remove from the environment all the stuff that negatively impacts a kid, as well as it talks about the issues that arise from people still suffering from a lack of development, like how uh, that one article where we read about how teenagers were more likely to engage in risky behavior. We learned a lot about that in class in detail, and these people suffer from still being in that state where they haven't developed, you know, as to supersede those issues that compile when you have a lack of development. And so it talks about how the impairment of such development often leads to the causes of death that were so prevalent among those dealing with the repercussion of ACEs. Um, and what I learned from the talk and why it's relevant, I learned a lot about preventative measures that can be put into place, as she gave the real life example of her clinic. I think that it's relevant for teachers who wish to be effective in making sure their students are headed down the right path in terms of developmental progression, because it's as future teachers, we're going to be the ones who comprise a lot of their environment as they're growing up. And if we can identify those issues, I remember we read in the one of our course readings talking about how a proper environment can basically negate all the negative effects that a developmental issue can come along with. And so I think it's relevant towards this class because her idea of a screening process and of risk mitigation that was also covered in this course is something that's very applicable to the lessons that we're trying to take away from this course. Thank you.